Coach Halfley's the guy. We're going to talk about it here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. A special thank you to each and every one of you who helped to make the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network in the world. The Dolphins have a new number one atop their coaching staff. The Dolphins agreed to terms with Jeff Hafley last night on a deal to make him the next head coach of the Miami Dolphins, and the reactions are all over the board. Exactly what you would expect to get, right? A very mixed bag in reactions from fans with the news that Coach Hafley, formerly the defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers for 2 seasons, before that, the head coach at Boston College, is the next choice to run the Dolphins from a conduit from front office and football personnel down to the players on the field. And I think the first thing that comes to mind for me with the news of Halfley is reading through the commentary and the comments made by those within the organization. We got 2 statements last night from the team. One was from Stephen Ross, and the other one was from John Eric Sullivan. And I always like to kind of read between the lines of what's said and what's not said in those, because I think it can oftentimes give you some insight on what the thought process was. And let me start here. A lot of y'all mad. Some of y'all are mad at me. I don't know whether or not Jeff Hafley is going to be a successful coach of the Miami Dolphins. Nobody does until they get out on the grass. But if you're not happy about this hire, you're going to have a lot of I told you so opportunities in 2026, in my opinion, because it's not going to be the best version of the roster. They are starting from scratch. It probably is going to be a worse record in 2026. But nobody knows until cleats touch grass and we push play and we figure out what we have and they try to build it. I think it's important for me to focus on presentation of facts and to say why it would work and why it would fail. As I try my best to stay in that lane, because like my opinion of like, was Jeff Hafley my number 3 pick for head coach or my number 6 pick for head coach or my number 1 pick? It doesn't matter. And it certainly doesn't matter after the fact for me to get up on a soapbox and be mad or upset or anything about it. I like Jeff Hafley. I think he's a fine hire. I think the cohesiveness and the trust and the pre-existing relationship, some of y'all think is a terrible thing. I think it's a good thing. I think there's plenty of examples. Like Sean McDermott took the head coaching job in Buffalo in 2017. They needed a new GM. They let the old GM finish the draft. They fired him after the draft, and they went through a hiring process. You know who he hired? His buddy, Brandon Beane from Carolina. Because they knew each other, there was a pre-existing relationship and trust. Now, a decade later, that trust erodes because they built a winner and they couldn't get over the hill, and Brandon Beane wins the Game of Thrones, and Sean McDermott's out yesterday after 9 years and 98 wins. It took all that and a bunch of disappointing divisional round and AFC championship game losses for that trust to erode. But they built a winner, and McDermott got there first. They went through the draft, and he hired his buddy. There's plenty of examples of people you know and trusting to come and do a certain thing a certain way and believing the same things that you do to start from scratch and build a team. That's the most appealing parts of Jeff Hafley. In my opinion, there's a lot of focus on passion. There's a lot of focus on motivation in the comments from both Stephen Ross and John Eric Sullivan, the kind of coach they're looking for. Not a scheme whiz. I don't care if it's a scheme whiz, personally. And Jeff Hafley's got some good scheme stuff on tape in 2 years, and we're going to talk about some of those things a little later in the show. But I kind of came in knowing a lot of what I wanted to say, but I wasn't sure what order was going to come out of my mouth, right? Presentation of facts. And don't hear me but not listen right now. Listen. They have not organizationally reset from people outside the organization in the entire football operation in the entire time that Stephen Ross has bought the team. That's a fact. It's not an opinion of, oh, well, they're saying the same things we've heard other people that got hired in Miami and they tried to hire somebody from Green Bay before and it's the same old hat. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not. And the fan base is all over the board with this. It is an undeniable presentation of fact. They have never fired the GM, fired the coach, hired people from outside the Dolphins' walls in the 20 years that Stephen Ross, going on 20 years that Stephen Ross has owned the team. That's a fact. The fact that they did that, that's a win. They needed to get outside the walls in Miami. These statements, I'll start with John Eric Sullivan's. Now I'm all fired up, right? Like I kind of came in like I want to dip my toe in the water. Where do I want this to go? It's out in the open now. John Eric Sullivan, Jeff is a great man of integrity, intellect, and passion whose players will buy into and play for. He has a vision for the kind of team we will be and the ability to motivate them and move in one direction on the path towards that goal. I'm thrilled to go on this journey with him, and together we will build a winner that this organization deserves. Again, the successes and failures is going to come down to execution. Anybody and everybody can say the right things, right? And whether you pick the right quarterback and you pick the right players with your premium assets, and you develop your talent appropriately, and you pick the right assistant coaches to help develop that talent, those are going to be the determinants in the success or failure of this. Not the fact that the guy's name is Jeff Hafley and worked with John Eric Sullivan for 2 years in Green Bay. I don't know. Stephen Ross. I believe great things ahead for the Miami Dolphins with Jeff Hafley leading the way. Jeff is an accomplished coach with a proven track record as a leader and a motivator. There's that word again. He has a tenacity and grit while at the same time establishing trust with his players in order to get the most out of them. I'm excited to see where Jeff leads us alongside John Eric Sullivan with our entire football operation as we will return the Dolphins to sustained success. You kind of get an idea of what they were looking for and what they weren't looking for. And the coaching, the X's and the O's matters, right? But a lot of that comes down to what kind of staff you put together. And that's the first test for Jeff Hafley. I'm sure it was discussed in the interview process. Who do you think you could bring with you to do this and who that? Be your offensive coordinator, your defensive guy, you can call play. Well, we'll get all those answers when we can. It's a test for Jeff Hafley for sure. But the kind of coach and the kind of pillar that they were looking for to fill this silo in the football operation. Passion, motivation, player relations. I reflect on what the narratives were, what the state of affairs was with the Miami Dolphins 12 months ago. And I contrasted to the things that are the talking points and the buzzwords for the introductory statements welcoming the new head coach to the team. Okay, if your concerns are with Jeff Hafley and the offensive scheme, it's fair to have those questions because we don't know right now. We don't know who the OC is going to be. We don't know if they're going to pluck Adam Stenavich from Green Bay and let him call plays. We don't know if they're going to go with Shimko out of Dallas, who was his OC in Boston College and now the quarterback's coach in Dallas. We don't know if they're going to go with a lower end assistant like a Mannion. We don't know if they're going to go off the board. We don't know. I'm fascinated to find out, and it's going to help further expectations. But I, at the core, cannot accept that it's a failure because there was a pre-existing relationship when there are examples across the league of a lot of teams that when they start at the ground level and they rebuild from scratch, you have to have that level of trust and a connection, because there's a lot of hard decisions. There's a lot of stress early on because there is pressure to win. We'll see what they're able to deliver. It starts with the quarterback. As John X. Sullivan said over the weekend, it's going to start with the quarterback, and then it's going to go from there to the line of scrimmage, and their ability to foster a roster that has winning players in those phases. Here's how it could work, and then we'll get into how it could fail. We're going to do that next here on the show. Make sure you guys stick with us. If you've ever hired someone who looks good on paper but wasn't quite the right fit, you know how important it is to get good fits. If you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs you cannot make up. Indeed being the sponsor of today's show. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the front of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. If I needed to hire someone for this show, I'd go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need. Real experience, not just a resume buzzword. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results. By using Indeed sponsored jobs, listeners of this show get $75 in sponsored job credit. Help your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. That's Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Go right now. Support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions do apply. If you're hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You could buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets change the game. It's people moving the action, so when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but I wasn't sure the right way to apply that knowledge. Now I can take part of it live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures include swaps involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. So we presented some facts on facts. The Dolphins have not done X in Y years, right? Presented facts. This is the statements that they provided and the impression of the things that were important to them. How would it work? How will it work if it works? How it will work is the Dolphins end up with a strong pipeline of draft to rookie contract to second contract players on the roster. And part of this is the background of Jeff Hafley, is a guy who, as when he was the 4 years as a coach in Boston College, and they had some good NFL talent there, right? They had Christian Mahogany at guard. They had Zay Flowers at wide receiver. They had Donovan Izaraku. I mean, those last two guys are top 50 picks at BC. Right. And that's playing in the bottom third of the ACC as far as like the resources pipeline that you have at your disposal. So he's had some good incidences of good talent identification while serving as the head coach at Boston College. But as a college coach, you got to wear all those hats, right? You got to coach the team. You got to watch the film. You got to be involved in recruiting. You got to be involved in the transfer portal. You got to be involved in fundraising, right? Like you got to be a politician and from a fundraising, and then also be a football guy, but then also be a scout with recruiting. And that part of that spread of responsibilities is why Halfley left BC, right? But the fact that he has experience doing it means he can give positive collaborative input to John Eric Sullivan on what they are looking for players to fill certain roles on the roster. And because he's used to and accustomed with at BC, you're taking a lot of 2 and 3 stars and you're trying to bet on traits and develop those guys. You're going to be working with better players, but your point of emphasis in your background as a coach was in player development and pulling things out of players and educating them on techniques and concepts and opposing concepts and the kind of the mental maturation. If you were going to compete in the way in which Halfley did with 3 winning seasons and a bowl win, the second bowl win that BC's had since Matt Ryan was there, right? If you're going to compete in that end of the pool, it has to be because you had technical football players, right? You're not going to have the dominant athletes. Maybe you'll have some really raw guys that were late bloomers and turn into a Donovan Izaraku for you or a Zay Flowers for you. But a lot of those guys, it's you have to find a way to pull better versions of them out into reality from what they were when they got there. So if you're going to be a draft and develop team, and that's the focus in the background and the experience of the coach, that is how it would work. That is the thought process. And I believe with Halfley having the connections that he has in San Francisco under Kyle Shanahan and in Green Bay under Matt LaFleur, he should have all the connections that he needs, even that Brown staff that he was a part of. There are a number of successful offensive coaches that he's been in proximity with and cohabitated coaching staffs with. So if it's going to work, he needs to properly identify an offensive coordinator coming here, and ideally not a guy that's going to be a one-year one-and-doner, right? Like you could talk about Nate Scheelhaus, who's the passing game coordinator for the Rams, as a potential OC candidate, but he comes in here year one. If he blows the doors off, he might be going after you and you're back in this pond again, right? It's part of the risk of going with a defensive-minded coach. But if it were going to work, you'd properly identify an offensive coordinator. You're going to need a strong staff of educators regardless. So I think that's part of the measuring stick for what will determine successes and failures for Jeff Hafley. But I can see the cohesiveness school of thought. I can see the thought process. I could see the why and how it's important. And having that pre-established trust is important to make sure you're not losing players to the margins of, I thought this guy was going to be a 5 technique, and then the coach gets a hold of him and he wants to play him as a wide 9, right? Is a very extreme example of a wide 9 is just a speed rusher that's tilted off the edge and flies up the field, where a 5 technique is a guy that plays tight alignment to the offensive tackle and has to be able to use his hands and extend and deconstruct blocks versus being a space pass rusher, right? Well, I thought this guy was going to be a safety. They want to play him in the nickel. I thought he'd be a deep half player. I thought this wide receiver would do really well as the X, but they're working on him as the Z and running the clear out routes down the field because he's a 4-3 guy. I thought this guy would be a guard. They want to play him at tackle, right? Like there's so many different incidences of coaches and executives that, they lose players in translation. And with the amount of work that the Dolphins have to do and the amount of draft capital that they're hopefully going to be investing into the roster the next couple of years, minimizing your chances for losing players in translation is a part of the why. It's part of the why of why this choice makes sense. And I don't accept it. I embrace it. It doesn't guarantee success, and I'm not asking anybody to have blind faith that it's going to work, because there are risks. There were risks with any hire. But I think the things that would concern you with what their school, like you're going to have a choose your own event. It's an RPG game, right? Like I'm going to choose my character and my character strengths. And the Dolphins chose with John Eric Sullivan, the draft. We need to be better at the draft. That's going to be our specialty. That's going to be our primary focus. Well, you start tooling out your player, your character in the game. If you want to play the game that way, you need traits and tools and assets and weapons. If it's like Skyrim or whatever, right? Like is the video game analogy. You need to tailor what your character uses to maximize the way that you want to play the game. The coach is an extension of that, which is how I see the why. And I'd rather let it fail and then react than to just kind of slink around with my tail between my legs, because we've been bred as Dolphins fans for the last 2 decades to expect failure. Somebody say yesterday was the most embarrassing and worst day he's had as a fan in almost 50 years. Fan, we saw 62-7 in Dan Marino's last game, and you think hiring Jeff Hafley is a worse day than that? Respectfully. Let's touch some grass. Now, how would it not work? What's the risk? Let's get into that next here, Locked on Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Kicking off the year feeling good is the goal, right? And honestly, hydration is the easiest way to win. When you stay on top of that, your energy, your focus, and your mood all level up. Let's be real, plain water doesn't always cut it, especially when you're grinding through long days, hitting the gym, or want to stay consistent with your health goals. That's where Drip Drop comes in. Doctor-developed, proven fast hydration that helps your body and mind work better. Think clear focus, better energy, elevated mood, even that fresh skin glow. You could use Drip Drop as a part of your daily routine. It can change the game for you, not just with your workouts, but through your day to day. Drip Drop science-backed formula is trusted by firefighters, medical professionals, and over 90% of the top college and pro teams because it rehydrates you faster and more effectively than water alone. Right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com, use LOCKEDONNFL. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Stock up at dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each and every game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets that you like the most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day. See what boosts you want to apply. The boosts let you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You can make your picks, then apply profit boosts to go, even after bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. So how would this end up not working? Right? And you can kind of start with some of the questions that you maybe have with the background of Jeff Hafley and who he is as a coach and what his experiences are and are not, right? And he's never been a head coach at the NFL level. And if that's a critique and a concern that you have, I get it. And I don't have anything that's good to say that's going to make you feel better about that. Right? I do think it's a legitimate question. I would have liked, especially with some of the other coaches that were on the board, that would have been something that would have been nudging me in a different direction. Where you saw Robert Saleh went off the board and Halfley was going to interview in Tennessee today, but didn't get on the plane to go. And then the Titans had Saleh in the building and they hired Robert Saleh last night. Other coaches that I would have liked to have known about would have included Chris Shula, Clint Kubiak, Anthony Campanile. But Halfley was in the same tier for me as Shula, Kubiak, Campanile. So Shula, I would have probably been my sentimental choice. I think Robert Saleh had the best resume versus the criteria that I chose to present. And I don't know in the interviews who Robert Saleh said his offensive coordinator choice was going to be. I've seen Tennessee already tie it to Mike McDaniel. You know who's not going to come to Miami and be the offensive coordinator? Mike McDaniel. So if that's Robert Saleh and that was the plan at OC, like maybe Mike LaFleur wasn't interested in coming back a second time after Saleh let him go the first time. So if McDaniel's Saleh's choice, I get why that might be a disqualifier. And be like, all right, well, who else you got? He's probably not going to come back. Chris Shula sounds like he's the one of the two front runners for the Pittsburgh job. And what Halfley being in demand the way that he was, it was reported he was going to have the Titans, he was going to have the Raiders, he was going to have the Cardinals, and the Steelers were interested as well. He was also a finalist for the Atlanta job. Add Miami in the mix. That's 6 teams. That's a half a dozen teams that had Halfley as a finalist for the head coaching job. So you had the first crack at a guy that you had a connection with who was in-house on a Monday. Say you pass. Say Halfley goes to Tennessee and signs. And so they say, Robert, you can't interview Chris Shula until next Monday at the earliest. So if you're going to go that route, you better be sure you're going to get Chris Shula. You still got Pittsburgh out there, Buffalo just in the mix. Like, respectfully, you're not playing in that end of the pool right now. So unless you had 4 guys that you were comfortable with, and I don't think the Dolphins did based on the fact that they closed Halfley. Like, if you were going to milk things further with other candidates that would have been up at the top of my list, and then it would have included like a Chris Shula, you run the risk of letting the process pass you by. And it's like an auction draft in fantasy football. I got a couple of buddies that do this. Every year we have an in-person, we all went to high school together. And they don't spend at all for the first two and a half hours so that they can get to the end of and it's randomly pulled names. So there's no rhyme or reason to what order guys come out ahead. You have 3 guys at the end with like 150 auction dollars left. There's 3 good players left. And they just want to buy them up. They go for crazy money. You know what inevitably happens? The draft is over. One of those guys on a $200 auction dollar budget to start the night has got $120 left because he didn't have anybody to buy, and his roster stinks, and he ends up finishing in last place. You ran the risk of hanging yourself out to dry. But if it doesn't work with Jeff Hafley, the offensive instability, picking the wrong quarterback are the 2 biggest concerns. Not a surprise. That's going to ultimately determine the successes and failures of every regime that ever existed. Right? So I don't think you go into the Halfley era with any extra risk. I see no extra risk than what you would have with anybody that you chose. And that's why, for me, like, the angst, it kind of got under my skin yesterday. And you are entitled to fan however you want to fan and have whatever opinion that you guys want to have. I can't tell you otherwise. But with those micro concerns, just, you were going to have me the way. But the way that this fails is you don't draft as well as you aspire to. You pick the wrong quarterback, and you have instability on the offensive side of the ball. Like, the Texans have drafted well, and they picked, I believe, the right quarterback. Played horribly in the divisional round against New England, like horribly bad, CJ Stroud did. But they've had kind of instability on their offensive scheme. They need to be better on the offensive line. Still competitive, still winning playoff games. And I get it. It's the big black cloud and the elephant in the room that, you can't have a conversation about the Dolphins and big picture conversations around the team without acknowledging how long it's been since the team's won a playoff game. I get it. But I can't bring myself to let that put me in a position to expect failure. We'll present facts. I'll give opinions. I'll share what I would do. And we'll wait and see what happens. And right now, nothing's happened other than they have chosen a coach to help further amplify the chosen focus of what they want this version of the team to be. What's the Batman saying? It's the hero they need, not the hero they deserve. Or it's the hero they deserve, but not the hero they need. I don't know how the quote goes for the Dark Knight. But it's like, it's what this team needs right now. I don't need another offensive scheme wizard. I had people tell me the Dolphins have been making exciting or sexy hires. Like, we didn't have Mike McDaniel in his sunglasses on the FaceTime with the check your pulse clip, and everybody's all fired up, and the Shanahan offense and working with. Give me a little boring if it's got substance to it. I'll take that. Because this team needs substance. This roster needs substance. I think Halfley can do that. I think he can help John Eric Sullivan do that. So that's the hire, Jeff Hafley. Head coach, Miami Dolphins. Get used to it. We'll see what they do. We will let them dictate and determine how excited we should be with what they do and how they carry themselves and how they conduct themselves and how they execute the plan. The plan's going to sound great. I'm sure the press conference is going to be cool, and I'm going to be gushing about this quote and that quote on Friday. But I'll tell you straight up, their execution is what's going to matter. That's going to do it for us here today on the show. Keep it locked in right here, Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I'll talk to y'all again soon. Fins up.